Shalom and welcome back to By His Grace Marriage Ministry Podcast. My name's Amanda and I pray that you all are having a blessed prep day, and pretty soon I hope you have a blessed Shabbat for those of you that keep the 7th-day Sabbath. Praise Yah. So welcome back. This is going to be part 2 of Dangers of Lust. If you are listening to this, I would encourage you to stop this episode and go back and listen to part 1 first if you haven't done so already. Just want to give a quick reminder that at least with the Spotify platform, the way that they order the episodes of a podcast is the most recent one first. So if there are episodes that are being done that are in parts or is a series, just be mindful of what order they're in. And I would just encourage you to listen to them in order so that you don't miss anything important, okay? Praise be to Yah. So again, this is part 2 of the dangers of lust. And there was a lot that I covered in part 1, really, really good. And I would encourage you to please listen to that if you haven't already. So this is part 2 where I'm going to be sharing more scripture, more accounts on this topic. And then hopefully towards the end, I'm actually going to share a personal trial that I recently endured that ties into this topic. So just a quick recap again. I felt led very strongly in my heart to talk about this topic again. And I say again because I have done episodes on this topic before, not too long ago. I want to say around November or December, I recorded a few episodes just talking about the dangers of like attraction, like fatal attraction, affairs, how they happen, how they get started, different types of affairs, how to guard and protect your purity, guard your eyes at what you're looking at, and so on and so forth. Can there be forgiveness and reconciliation, after infidelity, after adultery, things like that. So I have talked quite a bit about this. And again, those episodes were actually created and published because it was around the time that I was actually enduring my trial that had a lot to do with that. So I am going to be sharing about that towards the end of this episode. It's not the easiest thing for me to do, but I feel that it may help and further prove just how dangerous this is. But not only through my account, but also look at the accounts that we're finding throughout the word of Yahuwah. This has been happening since the beginning. This has been a temptation, a works of the flesh, and ultimately an attack and a stronghold from Hasatan, from Satan, since the beginning, because he knows that we can be weak in our flesh, and that temptation, especially sexual temptation, can be great, and I don't mean great like fantastic. I mean great like it can be big, and it's a serious sin, brothers and sisters. As I said in part 1, not only do we sin unto Yahuwah, but we sin unto ourselves and to our spouses, or even if we're not married yet, we're still really sinning against them, right? Especially if marriage is in Yahuwah's will for us. And so it can really be destructive as well. In part 1, I shared a few verses, but some of the biggest ones that I shared was I read from the Testament of Reuben and also the Testament of Joseph. And we see there how both these men suffered greatly in different ways. Reuben, because he committed the act, he fell into temptation and into sin and committed adultery, with his father's wife. And then with Joseph, we see a bit of a different picture, but still dealing with the same thing, lust, where he was in this stronghold and just bondage for 7 years with this, woman, his master's wife, constantly lusting after him. And we see that there's a point where Joseph said that he fell on his knees crying out to Yahuwah, pleading with him to deliver him from this woman. That's how bad it was. And brothers and sisters, I can testify to, what he was going through. And that's another reason why I'm going to share, because it is a very powerful thing, brothers and sisters. It's a very negative thing. It's very harmful, and it can really overtake you. And, as I said in part 1, it all begins with the eyes, and Reuben says this, he confirms this. And it's just, it's a terrible thing to go through, and it's a serious sin. And here in part 2, we're going to go over some more accounts throughout the scriptures that is going to, further prove how serious that this is. Also going hand in hand with lust are soul ties. And I actually did an episode all about soul ties. In fact, I think that's what I called it, soul ties. And, here's the thing, brothers and sisters, is that, when Yahuwah created intimacy, when he created sex, he created it for the purpose to bring a husband and wife together to become one flesh. He says the two shall become one flesh. And we know he doesn't mean literally or physically, right? They're still two separate human beings. He means in a spiritual sense, and their souls coming together, basically. When you think about it, the act of lovemaking, of sex, is the closest that two people can be to one another. And it was never meant to be taken and to be perverted or misused. Every time you sleep with somebody who is not your spouse, you are creating a very strong bond between the two of you, but it's not in a healthy, positive way that most think it will be. It ends up actually, in fact, being a very negative, unhealthy thing that happens. This is why we see situations where people become infatuated to the point of obsession, where people begin to stalk, or they get to the point of hurting themselves or hurting the other person, or killing themselves or killing the other person, or all of these things that we've seen that even Hollywood has managed to grasp an understanding and picture of that. We've seen that in some movies. One movie that I've even talked about before in some of my episodes when I've discussed this is the movie Fatal Attraction that came out, I think, in the 80s. Look at what happened there. Look at how things transpired. Another movie that I can think of that Hollywood did was a movie called Obsession, right? And how many other shows and movies have probably been done and made that go along the lines of this, or glorify extramarital affairs or fornication, where people are just going around and sleeping with whoever they want to, people that they find attractive, and so on and so forth. Now, the one thing that I also shared in part 1 that I want to say again is that you would be surprised to learn that I want to say about 60 to 70% of individuals, possibly maybe 70 to 80% of individuals who fall into these temptations weren't intentionally trying to, okay? This is why it's so important that we guard our senses, like Reuben says, that we guard our eyes. If you see something that would cause you to sin, like Yahushua said, if your eye causes you to sin, gouge it out. And of course, he doesn't mean literally, but you get the picture. If you see something that's going to, like me, for the longest time, I knew that if I watched a movie or a show with a sex scene in it, and this was before I, came together in my relationship, right? But, if I saw something with that, it was going to ignite a fire in me, to where now I was going, to be having these urges and these feelings of wanting to be with somebody, So I got to the point where I knew even though I'm an adult, I could view it if I wanted to, but doesn't mean I should. And so I stayed away from stuff like that because I knew what it was going to do. It's not pleasing to Yahuwah, and I knew what it was going to do to me. And that's just which is sad, but from a TV show or a movie where a scene comes on like that. Imagine porn, which so many individuals, unbelievers and believers, struggle with that addiction as well. So, brothers and sisters, it's clear that Hasatan knows what he's doing when it comes to this. It's one of the biggest temptations that many people, struggle with or are struggling with. Okay, so that's why it's so important that we guard our ear gates, our eye gates, and so on and so forth. We, as believers and as followers of Yah, we need to be careful. And I was saying in part 1 that that's difficult because it's everywhere, right? I mean, it's so easily accessible. And it's so easy to see. I mean, even a platform like YouTube has a very dark side to it, where you can easily come across very inappropriate and sexual, things. It's in our movies, it's in our shows, it's in our music, right? And then unfortunately we have, women and men, but mostly women walking around provocatively, not at all modest. And again, lust of the eyes. It all starts with the eyes, and it's not just men. It happens with women too. But we know that there's a saying that men are visual creatures, right? And that they supposedly fall in love through their eyes. And I wouldn't really say in love. I would say probably more in lust, which is a huge difference. Remember, there's more to love than just intimacy. And there needs to be more to love than just intimacy if you want a relationship and a marriage to thrive and last, right? So you're really in lust, but it's not just men that fall for that. Women can too. And there's something that Reuben says in his testimony or his testament that really stood out to me, because the world has always made men seem like the dogs. Oh, they're always the ones to be unfaithful. They'll sleep with whoever. They'll do this and that. When really the truth of the matter is, and Reuben says it, women are the ones really to blame. They're the ones that beguile men. Plain and simple. It's a weakness that men have, and that's where women are strong at. Men are physically stronger, right? And in other ways, but that's where women can get men. They cause them to fall through lust of the eyes and lust of the flesh. Okay? So it's really something, but in all these accounts that I'm going to share, you notice similarities in between them all. But it all starts with the eyes, okay? What you see, Here's the thing, brothers and sisters, when you marry, you don't lose your eyesight. You see other people, and attraction to other people doesn't go away. I'm not sure why that is. If Yahuwah knows that it could cause us to fall. But you know what? It's not his fault either, because the reason why all of this exists in the first place is because we brought sin into the world, and we're in our flesh. But, the thing is that when you marry, you're not safe from that. Don't say that it'll never happen to you, okay? Because you don't stop being attracted to other people, okay? I'm just going to say it like that. This is how affairs still happen. There's many different reasons why affairs can happen, but this is one of them. I also shared in part 1 that, another big thing is that, Yahuwah's plan was perfect. Like, the way that he intended everything was perfect. When you think about it, women were usually in the home, okay? Back in biblical times and, quite a few decades ago, that's how it was. The women were home, the men worked, okay? Women were home, not because it's old-fashioned, not because that's how it's supposed to be, okay? If you're a wife and mother, your job is in the home, to care for your home, to care for your children, and so on and so forth. Ever since women started coming out of their homes and going into the workplaces and things like that, it gave more, like Reuben said, more chances of meetings, okay, where these married women are now working alongside married men or single men. And what happens? Once again, lust of the eyes. It gives more opportunity for there to be attraction taking place, okay, infatuation taking place, and so on and so forth. This is how more and more affairs happen. Look at some of the movies or shows maybe you've watched where the husband is working and he always ends up having an affair with his secretary, or you see what I'm saying? But it's because, why? Because we're in our flesh, okay? And because of lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, okay? This is why it's so important that we guard ourselves, because this is a big thing that Satan uses to his advantage to cause us to fall into sin and to ultimately not only destroy ourselves, but our marriages as well, okay? To destroy ourselves and our marriages and our relationship with Yahuwah. And again, I'll share more of how that affected me in my personal experience that I had. So anyways, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and I want to be cautious of time because I want to be able to share my trial, and things like that and how it ties in. So I want to look at some more scripture that I've come across that tie into this topic, and that's going to, just once again confirm to us and help us to understand how harmful and deadly and destructive that this can really be. So one of the first things that I want to start out with, and again, in part 1, we already went over 1 John 2:16, where he talks about lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. We looked at Galatians 5, which talks about the works of the flesh, which adultery, fornication, jealousy, all that is in there. That all tie in with lust and affairs and things like that. And then I read from the testament of Reuben, and I read from the testament of Joseph, and I also read Genesis 39, 1 through 20, which also had to do with the account of Joseph, just in less detail, that he endured with Potiphar's wife. So now we're actually going to look at some scripture in Genesis 34. And this is actually going to be a good example of kind of like a soul tie taking place as well. Which again, like I said, brother and sister, soul ties can just be, it's just not good to have a soul tie with someone you're not meant to, basically. Okay, so Genesis 34, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 8. So this is going to have to do with the only daughter of Jacob, of Jacob. I pronounce it Dinah. Maybe some of you pronounce it as Dina. I say Dinah. I could be wrong. I don't know. But just so you all know who I'm talking about, Dinah. This is the only daughter of Jacob, Jacob, and Leah. And I'm going to read a few verses of something that happens with her. Okay. It says, "And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the land, saw her and took her and lay with her and humbled her. And his being clung to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke kindly to the girl. And Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, Take this girl for me for a wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob kept silent until they came. And Hamor the father of Shechem went out to Jacob to speak with him. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved and very wroth, because he had done a senseless deed in Israel, by lying with Jacob's daughter, which should not have been done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, My son Shechem's being longs for your daughter. Please give her to him for a wife." Okay, so I wanna just go over a couple of things here. So first, we see exactly what Reuben spoke about and what I've said and how it all starts. Okay, it says, "And Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the land, saw her." He saw Dinah. Okay, so all he did was look at her. He obviously was very attracted to her, to the point that he took her, more than likely by force, okay, because it says, "and took her and lay with her and humbled her." So obviously, unfortunately, he must have raped her, okay? And even in the act of rape, okay, it wasn't consensual or anything like that. He basically forced her. It says, "And his being clung to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke kindly to the girl." So here we see in verse 3 an example of a soul tie had been created. Okay, now most people believe that soul ties are only formed through sex. Yes, they are formed through sex, but they can also be formed through other ways as well. And there's actually a really good example of this in the scriptures. It's not in any way sexual, but we see that it was a soul tie that was formed because of the closeness that the two had between each other. And it was the friendship between David and Jonathan. Scripture tells us that their souls knitted together. Okay, so that's another example of a soul tie, but a more positive, healthier soul tie, okay? But my point is, the reason why I share that is to say that soul ties are not only just formed through a sexual act, it can be formed emotionally as well, and that'll be something that I'll be sharing from my own experience and trial that I went through as well. So soul ties are very powerful, and they can be created in a few different ways. But we see here in this account, for example, that, he basically raped her, okay? He saw her, he lusted after her, he took her, he did, like Reuben said. Reuben literally said he could not sleep until he had done what he wanted, what his flesh wanted to do. In Joseph we see that, Potiphar's wife literally, got to the point where she was willing to kill her husband. She was willing to kill herself. She tried to, poison Joseph, or she tried to, put like a spell on him. And when you lust after somebody, when you are in this stronghold, the person that is lusting literally gets to the point that they're willing to do whatever to, it's just like they have to do this. It's like a drug, it's literally like, and it's a proven fact, hormones that are being released that it's like you have to have it. And so they go to these extremes. And it says here that Shechem literally basically raped Dinah. And then it says that his being clung to her. And then his father later says to Jacob, my son's being or soul longs for your daughter. Okay, this is how powerful this is, brothers and sisters. That's why you shouldn't, and I'm not saying that y'all are doing this, but that's why individuals should not go around and just sleep with whoever. This is what happens. Infatuation, which infatuation, by the way, brothers and sisters, is not love. Okay, infatuation happens. Obsession happens. Okay, it's a serious matter. All right. And so now he's at the point like, I have to have her. She needs to be my wife. And he sends his father to go talk to Jacob. And his father literally says, my son's being longs for your daughter. So it's a serious matter, brothers and sisters. And it's very, very sad that, this man literally, took her and basically lay with her by force. And then he had a soul tie with her. He basically was obsessed with her. He wanted her. And he had already had her, as so to speak, but he wanted to be with her. He was obsessed with her. So now I want to go to another example, another account. So now we're going to, one of the first ones we're going to look at is David. And then we're going to look at something that happened with one of David's sons and his daughter. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from 2 Samuel chapter 11 as soon as I get there. I'm sorry, I didn't mark these. I apologize, brothers and sisters. So, all right, I'm going to be reading from 2 Samuel chapter 11, and I'm going to read verses 2 through 18. And it came to be at evening time that David, rose up from his bed and walked about on the roof of the sovereign's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very good to look at. So just like what happened to Reuben, he saw Bilhah, his father's wife or concubine, bathing. So once again, as we've seen in all the accounts so far, it all starts with the eyes. It all starts with seeing. Okay? Verse 3, and David sent and asked about the woman. And one said, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So he sees this woman. He's like, okay, I want to know about her, because obviously he was very attracted to her. He was, turned on by what he saw. And he inquired about her, and they literally said, this is Uriah's wife. And even with David knowing that, it says in verse 4, he sent messengers to fetch her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Okay? So knowing that she was somebody else's wife, but because of what he saw, he lusted after her, and he had to have her. And he literally sent for her, and he lay with her. It doesn't say if she tried to say no, don't do this, if he forced her because he's the king. So she probably felt she had to submit to him because he is king, right? So obviously, same thing. David wasn't going to be able to sleep. He wasn't going to be able to move forward until he had done something with her, which obviously, because like I said in part 1, it could be, in most cases, it's sleeping with the person. In other cases, it's masturbating, thinking about the person, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, so blunt and detailed like that, but it's true. This is what lust causes people to do. Okay, if they can't sleep with a person, they'll more than likely, think about them and masturbate, and so on and so forth. The thing is, either way, it becomes a lustful thing, okay? It becomes sinful. Okay, so, and she came to him, and he lay with her, for she was cleansing herself from her uncleanness, and she returned to her house. And the woman conceived and sent and informed David and said, I am pregnant. Then David sent to Joab, send Uriah the Hittite to me. And Joab sent Uriah to David. And Uriah came to him, and David asked how Joab was doing, and how the people were doing, and how the fighting was going. And David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. And Uriah went out from the sovereign's house, and a gift from the sovereign followed him. So what we basically see here in these verses is after he's committed adultery, okay, he has lust, he commits adultery. He finds out that through this act, she becomes pregnant. So now he's basically like, oh, shoot, like, what am I going to do? So now he's trying to cover up what happened by getting the husband to go lay with his wife so that then, she could tell him that the baby is his, basically. That's what David is trying to do, okay? So let me finish reading, and then I'll just kind of break it down. So verse 9, it says, but Uriah lay down at the door of the sovereign's house with all the servants of his master, and did not go down to his house. And they informed David, saying, Uriah did not go down to his house. So David said to Uriah, did you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house? And Uriah said to David, the ark and Yisrael and Yehudah are dwelling in booths, and my master Joab and the servants of my master are encamped in the open fields. And should I go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live, and as your being lives, let me not do this. And David said to Uriah, remain here today also, and tomorrow I let you go. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. And David called him, and he ate and drank before him, and he made him drunk. And at evening he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his master, but he did not go down to his house. And it came to be in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab, and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter, saying, put Uriah in the front of the heaviest battle, and you shall turn away from him, and he shall be smitten and shall die. Verse 16, and it came to be, as Joab watched the city, that he appointed Uriah to the place where he knew there were brave men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite also died. And Joab sent and reported to David all the events of the battle. So we see here, brothers and sisters, that lust, took over David, and it literally caused him to commit adultery, to cause him to cover up and lie, what he had done, and then it caused him to commit murder. Because he tried this plan of trying to get the husband to lay with the wife, and he just didn't do it for different reasons. So David was like, okay, he's going to have to die, because I don't want this to be found out. I don't want this, that, and the next thing. So he committed even more sin to cover up his first sin that started because of lust. Okay. And, and you can go back on your own time and read it for yourself. But basically, Yahuwah was wroth with him and was like, how can you do something like that? And he sent a prophet to David to tell him. And David ended up repenting. But basically the outcome of that was the baby that was born to them, that was conceived through that act, died a few days after it was born. Okay. So, David fell, and he fell hard with this. Okay. And this is a man that is after Yahuwah's own heart. Okay. And this is what we see, brothers and sisters. This is what lust can do to a person. Okay. As we've seen with all the accounts that we've read so far, how it affects either one person in the matter or both. Okay. Because it always involves two people. But we see how it can affect one or both, because sometimes these situations, they can be reciprocal, right? And this is how affairs happen. But other times it can be one-sided, like in the case with Joseph, where Potiphar's wife was just, and it still affected Joseph greatly, Either way it goes, it's a destructive thing, brothers and sisters. It's a destructive thing. Now, let's look at another account, and this has to do with David's son. This is just a couple of chapters from where we just read. This is chapter 13, 2 Samuel chapter 13. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to read the whole chapter. I'm just going to read probably the first half of it. Let's see. Okay, so 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1. And after this it came to be that Absalom, son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, son of David, loved her. And Amnon was distressed, even to become sick, because of his sister Tamar, for she was a maiden, and it was hard in the eyes of Amnon to do whatever to her. So already we see within the first few verses, he was infatuated with Tamar. Okay, Amnon was infatuated with Tamar. He lusted after her, and it affected him to the point of sickness. Okay, remember I was saying, lusting after somebody affects you in such a major way, brothers and sisters, mentally, emotionally, physically, especially when you want them. Like, that's what lusting after somebody is. Right? Reuben said it. He said, I could not sleep until I had done what I needed to do. You know, look at Potiphar's wife. Look at all the things that she tried to do. She got to the point towards the end where she literally tried to take Joseph by force. She tried to rape him. Look at what David did, what we just read. Knowing that she was another man's wife, he still sent for her. He abused, that was another thing. He abused his power. Right? He knew he was king, so he knew that she was going to have to submit to him. And he abused that. And he obviously couldn't move on after what he saw, which was her bathing. You know, again, it all starts with the eyes, but look at how sick it makes a person. To the point of obsession, to the point of sickness, to the point of stalking, to the point of going to the extremes. Okay? Okay, so again it says, Amnon was distressed even to become sick because of his sister Tamar, for she was a maiden, and it was hard in the eyes of Amnon to do whatever to her. Verse 3, and Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, son of Shema, David's brother. Now Jonadab was a very cunning man, and he said to him, why are you, the sovereign's son, becoming thinner day after day? Explain it to me. And Amnon said to him, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Okay, so he was in love with her, or infatuated with her, to the point that he was obsessed. It was making him sick. Okay. And Jonadab said to him, so look at this. Look at what then happens. Okay. And the reason why this friend instructed this to Amnon is because he's basically saying, you're sovereign. Like, you're royalty. Like, you're royalty, bro. You know, like, you can have whatever you want. And then look at what he tells him. He says, and Jonadab said to him, lie down on your bed and pretend to be sick. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, please let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and make the food before my eyes so that I see it and eat it from her hand. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be sick. And when the sovereign came to see him, Amnon said to the sovereign, please let Tamar my sister come and make a couple of cakes for me before my eyes, so that I eat from her hand. And David sent to Tamar to the house, saying, please go to the house of your brother Amnon and make food for him. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house while he was laying down, and she took dough and kneaded it, and made cakes before his eyes and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and turned them out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, make everyone go away from me. And they all went from him. And Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them to Amnon her brother in the bedroom. And she brought them to him to eat, and he took hold of her and said to her, come, lie with me, my sister. And she answered him, no, my brother, do not humble me, for it is not done so in Israel. Do not do this wickedness. And I, where could I take my shame? And you would be like one of the fools in Israel. And now please speak to the sovereign, for he would not withhold me from you. But he would not listen to her voice, and being stronger than she, he humbled her and lay with her. So once again, we see another person being taken by force, basically being raped. Okay? His lust was so bad that this is what it brought him to do. And then look at what happens. Verse 15. So after he lays with her, this is what happens. It says, Amnon then exceedingly hated her, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, Arise, go. Why do you think that happened? Guilt more than likely got to him. So it's like I said, brothers, it's like a drug. When someone, and I say this with all respect, I'm not trying to judge anybody or anything like that, or make light of it or anything. But when someone who is addicted to a drug, they jones, right, until they get the drug. Then they get the drug, they use it, they get high. And then once they get high, then after a time, they experience a down, right? It goes away. And what happens? They're agitated, or they're just like, man, I acted like that because I needed it so bad. And now look, this is what happened to Amnon. He went through all of that to the point of sickness, right? That's how bad the lust was. He slept with her, got it out of his system. And afterwards, he must have realized, like, what have I done? What did I do? Like, I never should have done this, And what it did was it made him angry because he felt guilty. He basically felt guilt for what he did. But brothers and sisters, this also is an example of how lust can blind you. It can blind you and bring you to the point of doing something that you otherwise would never do in your right mind. This is how bad lust gets. It's like anger. Anger can blind a person. Somebody can get so angry that they can kill somebody, okay? How many times do we see in the news, movies, shows, and all that, what people do in a moment of anger? Because it blinds them. It's a wrath that, like, it blinds them. Okay? Same thing with lust. It's the same exact thing. So now he's angry with her and he tells her to go, to get out. Verse 16, and she said to him, No, for this evil of sending me away is worse than the other you have done to me. But he would not listen to her. And he called his young man serving him and said, Now put this one out away from me and bolt the door behind her. And she had on a long coat, for the sovereign's maiden daughters wore such garments. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her long coat that was on her, and put her hand on her head and went away crying bitterly. So, it's sad, brothers and sisters. It's incredibly sad. Like I just said, lust blinds, and lust will drive a person to the point of madness. It will drive a person to the point to do something such as to rape somebody, to rape that person, or to stalk them, right? To become obsessed over them, to do whatever it takes to get what they long for. And that's what lust does. They long to fulfill, to be fulfilled sexually with that person, brothers and sisters. It's like a drug. You literally become addicted to that person sexually, basically. Okay? That's how dangerous it is. That's how dangerous it is. I cannot say that enough. So those were all the accounts that I wanted to share, but now I want to read some scripture that talks further about this. And it's both scriptures that I'm going to share, or the scriptures that I'm going to share are from two books of wisdom. The first one is Proverbs, and then the second one is the book of Sirach. So let's go to the scripture in Proverbs first, and I'm going to be reading from Proverbs chapter 7 concerning this. Okay. Like I said, brothers and sisters, we don't just see this happening in our world and in society. It's also portrayed or reflected in movies and shows and even music and things like that. But it's also in the scriptures. It's in the word of Yahuwah. It's serious. This is serious. Okay. So Proverbs chapter 7, and I'm probably just going to, I'll just read the whole chapter because it's not too long. It says, "My son, guard my words and treasure up my commands with you. Guard my commands and live, and my Torah as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding a close friend, to guard you against a strange woman, against a foreigner who flatters with her words. For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice, and I saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths, a young man lacking heart, passing through the street near her corner, and he went the way to her house. In the twilight, in the evening, the black and dark night, and look, a woman met him, dressed like a whore, with a hidden heart. She was boisterous and stubborn, and her feet did not stay at her own house. Now in the street, now in the square, and at every corner she lurks. And she took hold of him and kissed him, and she hardened her face and said to him, Shalom offerings are with me. Today I have paid my vows, therefore I came out to meet you, to earnestly seek your face, and I found you. I have spread my bed with coverings, colored linens of Mitzrayim. I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with love, for my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took a bag of silver with him. He comes home on the day of the covering. With her many words she leads him astray. With her smooth lips she seduces him. He goes after her immediately, like an ox he goes to the slaughter, and as in chains a fool to the punishment, till an arrow strikes through his liver like a bird rushing into a snare, and did not know it would take his life. And now listen to me, you children, pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways, do not go astray in her paths. For many are the wounded she has caused to fall, and numerous are all her slain ones. Her house is the way to the grave, going down to the rooms of death. And it confirms what Reuben says in his testament. Women beguile men. That is the strength that they have. They are able to cause men to fall into these traps. The weakness, why? Because the lust of the eyes. And all she said to him was, hey, my bed is made up. I've got things ready to go. Come on, let's take our fill of love until the morning. My husband is not home. Let's do this. And he goes after her immediately. Now, not all men are like that. Some men have more of a, and they say no, like Joseph. That movie from, it's stormy here, brothers and sisters. I'm sorry if you hear thunder. Like that movie Obsession, where the husband actually fights off this woman who continues to try to seduce him and to go after him. So not all men fall for it, but unfortunately, majority of men and women are weak in that area. It's a big temptation. So Proverbs 7, which of course we all know Proverbs is written by Solomon. Solomon confirms what Reuben says and what Joseph says, right? So now let's go to the book of Sirach. And I just realized, brothers and sisters, there's going to be a part 3 because I'm not going to have enough time to share my trial. So there's probably going to be a part 3. I may not get to it this evening. I will probably either do it tomorrow or the following day. So I'm sorry about that. I do have time limits when I record these episodes, and there's been a lot to say. I was hoping to fit it all in one episode. That didn't happen. Then I was hoping to do 2 parts. That doesn't look like it's going to happen either, but that's okay. We can do a 3rd part. No big deal. So let's take a look at the book of Sirach. And we're going to start with chapter 25. And I am going to be reading verses 20 to 26. Okay. Let's see here. Here we go. All right. So as the climbing of a sandy way is to the feet of the aged, so is a wife full of words to a quiet man. Do not stumble at the loveliness of a woman, and do not desire her for pleasure. A woman supporting her husband is full of wrath, hardness, and much reproach. A wicked woman causes courage to cease, causes a heavy face and a wounded heart. A woman that does not comfort her husband in distress causes weak hands and feeble knees. From the woman came the beginning of sin, and because of her we all die. Give water no outlet, nor a wicked woman freedom to roam. If she does not do as you would have her, cut her off from yourself and give her a certificate of divorce and let her go. Okay? And then I'm going to read chapter 26, verses 6 through 12. And it says, But a woman that is jealous over another woman is grieving to the heart and sorrow, and a lashing tongue which makes known to all. An evil wife is a yoke shaken to and fro. He who has hold of her is as though he held a scorpion. A drunken and wandering woman causes great wrath, and she does not cover her own shame. The whoring of a woman is known by her haughty looks and eyelids. If your daughter is wayward, keep her straight, lest she abuse herself through too much freedom. Watch over one with a hard eye, and do not marvel if she trespasses against you. She shall open her mouth as a thirsty traveler who has found a fountain, and drink of every water near her. By every hedge she shall sit down, and open her quiver for every arrow. Okay? So I think you all get what Sirach is saying there. Oh, goodness. And then 42. And notice, brothers and sisters, how we haven't read anything that says a man does this, right? That goes around and just preys on. I mean, yes, it does happen. But notice how a lot of the accounts we've read, it's talking about how women seduce men. Not so much men seducing women, right? All right, so the last thing that I'm going to read is Sirach chapter 42, verses 12 through 15. I'm on the wrong page. Okay, so here we go. Do not look upon the loveliness of every woman, and do not sit in the midst of women. For a moth comes from garments, and wickedness from women. Better is the hardness of a man than a courteous woman, a woman who brings shame and reproach. Let's see, I said to 15, yeah. No, 15's not. So just a woman who brings shame and reproach. Better is the hardness of a man than a courteous woman. So again, Sirach pretty much points out, wicked women or evil women or whatever were basically women who were not only loose, so to speak, but were seductive. Okay. And that's why he just like Solomon and Reuben and Joseph and all of them warns, do not pay attention to the loveliness of a woman, right? Reuben says that very clearly as well in his testament. He tells his sons the exact same thing, okay? So if I have any brothers listening, please, guard your eyes. Women, same thing, guard your eyes. And again, in my experience, my trial that I'm going to share, I'm going to explain how this can happen to women as well, okay? It can absolutely happen to women. And, again, brothers and sisters, I can't express enough. And hopefully by what I've shared with you today in both of these episodes, the, scriptures that I've shared with you, the accounts that I've shared with you, that you understand the seriousness of this, and how it can really ruin someone and how it can affect to the point of illness or even death. It's a serious sin, brothers and sisters. It's not to be taken lightly. And what's so sad is that our world, one of the biggest things that we see in our world is the sexual temptation everywhere, and people just taking sex and treating it as if it's absolutely nothing. Hopping from bed to bed, being with whoever they want to be with. People don't realize the destruction that they're causing, the destruction that they're creating, the hearts that they're breaking, the minds that they are causing to be unstable. It is a huge, huge thing. And it's everywhere, brothers and sisters. It's something that Hasatan uses to his advantage. It's a huge way that he causes people to not only sin, but to fall into these strongholds, these bondages that literally hold them captive. Again, whether it's one-sided, where it's just an individual that's just lusting and obsessed after the other individual, or it's reciprocal and you're having an affair, or it may not be an affair. It could just simply be fornication. It could be both are single and sleeping together because they lust after one another. That's fornication. Or they're committing adultery. They're having an affair because one or both individuals are married. Again, all of it comes from lust. Whether it's one-sided, where you have an individual that is infatuated to the point of obsession and lusting after an individual, but the individual either doesn't know or they don't feel the same way, they don't reciprocate it. Or you have a situation where both are single and they lust after each other and they decide to just have sex with each other as much as they want. That's fornication. And then you have a situation where two individuals lust after each other and either one or both individuals are married, and it becomes adultery. Okay, this is what happens. Yes, it's a choice, but I will also tell you, brothers and sisters, that it can come on where you don't even see it coming. And this is what happened in my case. Okay, it can happen to where you don't even expect it. You weren't looking for it. It was something that was never a thought in your mind. You would never consider doing it. And this is why I say 60 to 70%, possibly 80, had no intention of falling into an attraction with somebody or a connection or lusting or anything like that. It happens because, like I said, we still can become attracted to other people, even if we're married. This is why, again, it's so important that we guard ourselves. We guard what we're looking at. If we find ourselves in a situation where you feel like you're connecting with this person, or you think they're handsome, or you think they're pretty, you think they're beautiful, you need to get away from that person. It doesn't make you rude. It doesn't make you mean. You're protecting yourself and them. I have said this many times throughout my podcast. I do not recommend, brothers and sisters befriending the opposite sex. If you're single and you befriend the opposite sex, you need to be careful and have boundaries. Okay? If you are married, I don't recommend you at all befriending the opposite sex. Okay? Don't do it. Do not do it. I've even seen cases in real life where a husband and wife will befriend another husband and wife, and they'll get together, they'll come over each other's houses, they're with their spouses, they're not by themselves or anything, they'll go out to eat, they'll have an outing together, whatever, and it can still happen where the husband can be attracted to the other husband's wife, or the wife can be attracted to the other wife's husband. Or brothers and sisters, you have to understand, even when we're married, it doesn't take away the fact that we can still become attracted to another individual. Okay? And Hasatan goes even further than that and makes it even more wicked, as if that wasn't possible enough. And people are becoming attracted to the same sex. Now there's homosexuality. That's a whole other thing. But brothers and sisters, this is why I've said so much throughout my podcast. I do not recommend that you become friends with the opposite sex. Do not connect with anybody on social media. Do not counsel the opposite sex. Do not do anything like that, because you are opening the door for there to be attraction, and if there's already attraction, eventually a connection is going to be formed. This is what we have to understand, brothers and sisters, okay? It's easy to become attracted to somebody. It's easy to become infatuated with somebody, especially if maybe they have qualities that individual maybe has been looking for, or that's what they find appealing. Or, if they're married, maybe they're missing certain things in their marriage that you bring. So even more so, they're going to be more attracted to you, and they're going to start falling for you. And then they're going to lust after you, or vice versa, or in different orders. It can happen in different ways, brothers and sisters. Okay? And we see this in Yahuwah's word. We see this in the scriptures. We've seen it, even the world, even Hollywood has portrayed these things. Because it happens. And I can tell you firsthand it happens because I went through an experience like this. I'm ashamed to admit, but I'm going to share it because I feel it's important. And don't think that it'll never happen to you because you're married or because you've always been a loyal, faithful person. Me too. I've always been a loyal, faithful person. I never would have thought or expected that something like this could ever happen to me. And it did. And I did not see it coming. And let me tell you something, the enemy, okay, because I'm home all day, every day. I don't go out. Okay, I don't work. I don't anything like that. And my situation happened because it literally showed up at my door. The enemy is crafty and he's cunning, brothers and sisters. And he will cause people to fall in different ways. By doubt, by fear, by confusion, okay? By double-mindedness, by lust, by counterfeit. There's many ways, brothers and sisters, that he can cause us to fall. And I'm going to share more of that in part 3 when I share my trial, my experience that I endured. Okay? Very serious matter, brothers and sisters. Again, please listen to these in order. I highly encourage you. Please check out the scriptures that I shared with you on these episodes. If you want to read them for yourself, please feel free to do that as well. I would encourage that. So anyways, brothers and sisters, that is it for this episode for part 2 of the dangers of lust. Stay tuned for part 3 of the dangers of lust that will be coming, I guess, over the next day or so, maybe a couple of days, just really depends, as tomorrow is Shabbat. And with that being said, I pray for those of you that keep the 7th-day Sabbath, I pray you have a very blessed and restful Shabbat. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk with you in my next episodes. Shalom.